Hello, my name is Monica Kretschmer, and this is the Woman of Inspiration podcast, where we speak with women who lead, inspire, and motivate. Today, I have a very special guest. I was super excited to have on the show today, and I am thinking that this is going to be one of the best interviews this year, and we're in November. So it's my pleasure to introduce Catherine Bell. She is the CEO of the Awakened Company. Catherine is a successful serial entrepreneur, business leader, and best-selling author. She is renowned for helping organizations foster healthy corporate cultures through personal development. She founded BluEra, which is a Profit 500 executive search and team transformation company, which exemplifies her Awakened Company system. And Catherine, I will get you to talk a little bit about that. After selling BluEra to HDR, Catherine now leads the Awakened Company as CEO, focusing on strategy with Soul Consulting. Notably, in 2022, she received the Platinum Titan Business Awards for Female Executives at the Year in Consultation. So, Catherine, this is where we're going to start. So, welcome.
Thank you so much for having me, Monica. It's just a privilege to be with you.
Well, I'm super excited about the conversation today. And like everybody knows that these are really authentic conversations, and really we dive into things and let the conversation go where it needs to go. But where I'd like to start off with is you've obviously achieved such a huge amount of success. But I like to go back to, did you ever like that career path? How did you get to where you are today? So maybe let's start there. What inspired you to pursue your career?
Well, this is coming to me in this very moment. And imagine this. I'm a teenage girl and I open a magazine and I see Paulina Portsakova. And she's in the magazine. And I thought she was the CEO of Estee Lauder. So I said to my mom, this is who and what I'm going to be. I'm going to be the CEO of an organization when I grow up. And my mom said, Kath, that's not the CEO of the company of Estee Lauder. That's a model. I said, no way, Mom. That is the CEO. And I am going to be the CEO of an organization at one point. So it's almost like I saw when I was a teenage girl that eventually I knew I wanted to lead, and I loved leading. As a young child, I led regattas, and at the same time, our family was moving every 2 years across Canada, and that was really hard. So I never ever felt like I had any friends, because I would move and then have to make friends and have to make friends and have to make friends. And I think that resiliency of having to move, Monica, helped me become very, very, very resilient when it comes to what's happened in my career. I started off with a sociology degree and from Western. And you'd think, what is a sociologist going to do? And I was thinking about at Western, I'm like, where am I going to go from here? What am I going to do? And I thought either I could move back to Montreal, love Montreal, could move back to Winnipeg, love Winnipeg, or I could move back to Calgary. Where are the hottest opportunities? And I said, oh, Calgary. So moved to Calgary. And I literally had to send hundreds of resumes out with the fax machine at the time. I was also physically like dropping them off to different places to try to find a job. It was hilarious because no one was really hiring at the time either. Anyway, I finally got into market research, and I had such a blast doing it for a few years. And then it became a little not as enticing, shall we say, as I would have enjoyed it. So I saw a career counselor, and the career counselor's like, I think you'd really like executive search. And I knew a little bit about executive search because I had this amazing aunt who was in executive search at Corn Ferry in the UK. And I'm like, okay, I'm going to go and, try to get into executive search. And well, again, nobody was hiring. And I had to write to somebody. I was writing to people, what are the top 5 reasons you should hire me? So I was writing to, and somebody hired me based on that. And then I eventually became their business partner, did my MBA, was on the highest performing MBA team in Canada, And then that partnership, my partner moved to Spain, joined one of the top 10 executive search firms in the world, was one of the highest performing in terms of revenue generation. And my business partner, my former business partner, Shahana, and I, like, we think we can do things differently, really creatively, very magnetically. And so it was just an amazing firm that we were at with amazing people. So we said to the partners, we're starting our own firm. And we thought we'd be walked out the door right away. Well, no, they said, we'll keep you as long as we could possibly have you. It was probably it was a very challenging 3 months because we were setting up our business, which was BluEra. And BluEra became like a petri dish of really, how do we create healthy corporate cultures while developing a professional services firm? And we did things radically differently. We were doing mindfulness in 2008. We were doing bring your dog to work day. We were doing unlimited vacation. And we literally saw it as a play field. So BluEra eventually became a best workplace. And it was a profit 20 in Alberta, profit 200 in Canada. So the financial returns were there with creating healthy corporate culture. At the same time, at one point, I was going for Enneagram training in New York City, and I was sitting with my colleague, Carolyn, and we're in a dimly lit cafe. And it was like lightning struck me. And it said, you're to write a book called The Awakened Company. And so I turned to Carolyn. I'm like, Carolyn, the universe has kind of knocked on my shoulder and said, you're to write this book, The Awakened Company. So I did. And I started off, and then we brought more partners into BluEra, and I got my partners to read it. And they're like, Kath, this book is terrible. It's absolutely terrible, because it was on executive search originally. So the book was not about creating healthy corporate cultures, but I kept on working it and weaving it and seeing what the external environment was guiding me towards. And I really wanted Eckhart Tolle's publisher to publish my book. So at the same time, I knocked on her door, and she's like, no, I'm not going to write a book on the consciousness and organizations. So I've been getting no's. I've gotten a lot of no's in my life before doors open. And I just want everybody to know that it's okay when some doors are meant to stay shut, and some doors are meant to squeak open a little bit, and some doors are meant to be blasted open. Well, what happened and I kept on working on the book, and then I brought in Otto Scharmer from MIT, Dr. Julian Barling from Queen's University, Mac Van Milligan from ARC Financial, Rosemar Cario, the former CEO of Patagonia, and got their insights. So it was becoming quite an interesting project. At the same time, I had two collaborators, Russ Hudson and Christopher Papadopoulos, and Constance Keller from Namaste saw the vision, and she said yes to publishing it. And so while BluEra was like the petri dish of how to, I made a ton of mistakes leading too. Like, I just want to say, like, and each mistake was like a learning. We can talk about that. I'd be happy to share some of my big mistakes. So that petri dish really gave birth to the Awakened Company. And then when the partners and DHR took over, I became like a grandma to the firm. And it was they no longer needed me. And I was very much pulled to, how do we create organizations that serve humanity and solve the greatest problems of our time? So ever since then, I've been doing corporate culture consulting work with Awakened Company and executive coaching. And now we have a whole video on demand library that was thanks to COVID, taught in 23 different countries, the Awakened Company process. This September, we're having our first ever certification process for Awakened Company, which is a big deal. I'm just going to have a small collective that I hope to empower with the process of how to do Awakened Company work, which I'm super excited about, and have a number of books coming out, everything from poetry to creativity in the Enneagram to how to build more very process driven an awakened company or awakening organization. And at the same time, I've been a mother. I play tennis, I windsurf, I have the Awaken Project, which helps female entrepreneurs get out of poverty. And I just want to say my path has not been linear. And I think I call it it's like the dance of the Dakini is not known, like the dance of the divine feminine, because we aren't typically kind of 9 to 5. I have always been dancing. It's never been this kind of straight line. It's always been sideways, backwards, forwards, and every which way. However, there's always my personal aim and my values have always held me true.
There is so much here, and I'm super excited about sort of diving into a couple of these points that you talked about, Catherine. So thank you for being so open to sharing exactly the challenges, but also the successes as well, because I think that's really important. So one thing that I know people are becoming more mindful and more soulful, and
Mm,
definitely when you started down that road, that whole wellness piece into the corporate culture wasn't really embraced, and it really only just really become very, very strong, even just in 2020 during the pandemic, when it was like hit over like with a brick over somebody's head, going, this is important, we need to attack that. So what I want to find out from you is, when you're getting these signs, because I
mm,
think it's really important, let's go down that spiritual road for a second. What does that feel like to you? And have you ever not listened to it? So number one, what does it feel like? Have you ever not listened to it and then
mm.
thought, no, that's the sign. Next time it happens, I'm going to listen to it, even though it doesn't make sense. So maybe you can talk a little bit about that, because I have my own experiences and I'd love to know what yours are.
And I'd love to hear what yours are too, Monica. So let's talk about that too after I respond. So the universe to me is always giving us clues as to what is and is not the right direction. So when we experience synchronicity, if we see something that's kind of repeating, it's for me a sign to follow that thread, to follow that golden thread. That's almost like the universe is saying, Kath, here are some breadcrumbs, please follow, please follow. So they're outer signs that feel aligned with my inner being, and then my heart, the lights of my heart light up, and that's when I know to really, really, really pay attention. When I have not followed my intuition before, and it didn't work out as well as if I had followed my intuition. Um, the situation was, I was being asked to join a partnership, and all my intuitive, my whole body, it's really almost a bodily sensation, was like, like, and our bodies vote for us, like, and my body was like, no, 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 but yet mentally everything seemed to add up, and I went into that partnership. It was okay. It wasn't as good as it could have been.
Mm.
I think I would have been better served had I followed the intuitive thread that was really kind of pulling on me. And intuition also often invites us into what is uncomfortable. And I think it's really important to have that learning mentality for, okay, I'm going to get uncomfortable here. Like, I really feel these next few years, I'm being pulled into a very uncomfortable space for me, being more vocal, being more weaving in the wisdom traditions that have been woven into the book that I also teach about. So being more vocal. And for me, that feels like, even now, I'm a little bit tentative in my body, and yet all the signs are there. And I work with a lot of female executives, and often they'll have, crystals in their bras, and magical, I'd say magical instruments all around them, and they keep it secret. So what is it going to take for us all to get our secrets out and into the world?
Okay, first and foremost, I used to have a crystal in my bra all the time. And when I actually am trying to think about something, and I just want to almost speed through that process and get my answer, I have another process now, but in the beginning I would be like shoving rocks all over my body wherever I could fit them, and there was a crystal in my bra. So I completely resonate, and I've subscribed to that. I actually sleep with them under my pillow.
So, and this is more common than we let on. So how do we use our intuition and use the right side of our brain as well as the left side of our brain, so that we live more in harmony with the planet and with what is being called for. We live in, and everybody, invite everybody into living more into the divine masculine and divine feminine.
Mm.
Because I think we've been so wired to think that, and I love business research, don't get me wrong, and we weave business research into everything we do. Like, for example, most CEOs don't know, if we focus 2/3 on corporate culture and 1/3 on financial success, that's where alchemy is. And I think that 2/3 culture is the divine feminine, and the 1/3 finance is like the divine masculine. We need both.
Mm-hmm.
And yet people are so kind of, it's almost like we need to take the tape off of our mouths and just communicate some of our what we use to help us tap into our superpowers.
And opportunities like this today are going to help that, because somebody listening and then the other person listening, it's like a ripple effect. And so having these conversations where they're like going, there's two really bright, incredible women, but they both rely heavily on their intuition to guide them. There's something there. And I think that the more that we can talk about it and normalize that, the more people are open to actually take that tape off their mouth and join in the conversation as well, right? And a lot of this, the signs, the feelings, the intuitions might be different for everybody, like yours and mine. Yours came through your head.
Yes.
You know, mine come a different way, you know, but I've learned how to embrace that.
And how do yours come? Because I think that there's something that everyone can learn from that.
So I'm going to share that I also did not listen to the signs, and which really led me down the road of marrying the wrong person, even though, and there's a big story there. I mean, there were several signs all the way up to the day before I got married. My mom got super sick, right? And I almost canceled because she almost didn't make it. And so the universe is like, hold on a sec, I'm going to throw a big one for you because you're really not waking up. And so that is another story, but I did not listen to that. And that was probably one of my biggest lessons, was when I sat back and I looked at all of those things going, knock, 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 hello. And the stones started out small. And then all of a sudden they got bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger, all of a sudden, to where there's like a boulder being tossed at you. And if you really don't want to pay attention, you're going to find a way of like still like pushing that boulder away. Right? But the stones start small and they get bigger and bigger. So what I've learned is that I ask a question that I want guidance on. And because I take in a lot of information, I'm always taking in something. And so I found that it was really interrupting my sleep. And so I thought, I'm exhausted. How am I possibly going to get some sleep when I'm constantly, you know, I'm firing on all cylinders? And so I learned this way of actually getting my sleep and saying, asking the question, and then I wake up and my answer appears. And so I go to bed and have a great sleep, and I cannot be, you know, thinking about it. Mind you, I am in my subconsciousness, but I always wake up. It's become like a magic trick. I'm like, okay, so I'd really like to know XYZ. Okay, good night. And I know I'm going to wake up and there's my answer.
Yeah. So having those tips, like, I love that. Ask the question.
Ask the question, and then just go to bed, go to sleep, go have that shower, go have that walk.
That is wisdom right there. And it can really help make great decisions versus automatic decisions, which I think often we're so on autopilot in terms of how we've been socialized and how we've been taught to be. So I love that's almost like a power of the pause tactic, is to, you know, put the question in to your consciousness before bed and then wake up and see what appears. And one of the other tips that I do is, you know, I work with the Enneagram a lot, which is a roadmap for how do we be more present and more present as leaders. Is I walk around the 9 different archetypes of the Enneagram and see how they would respond to whatever question or challenge I'm facing. And then I also find that having that map, that architecture, is also helpful. But there's so many little tricks that are more of the intuitive nature than the kind of automaticity. I think when we're in automaticity, we're out of presence, we're out of that vertical alignment. And I think what we're being asked to do more and more is to tap into that vertical universal alignment to serve society.
So, Catherine, we just had a little commercial break here for a moment, but I just wanted to go back to, you talked about being on autopilot. And I know that we were talking about spiritual connections and intuition. My definition of autopilot is that I trust the universe. And so I download and I put myself on autopilot, knowing that the universe is going to open up the door. And if I trust my intuition, I'm going to end up where I need to be. And I just release kind of control and just put my trust in that. But when you talk about autopilot, it's in another, you talk about it in a different way. So maybe you can expand on that a little bit more.
Yes. So when I mentioned autopilot, what I was meaning, Monica, is when we behave from default, when we behave from our ego versus essence, versus our awakened state, when we behave from, for example, I know I'm an Enneagram type 8, and I can often get quite angry. So when I behave from that default of anger, that's what I mean by autopilot. And some people, everyone has a different default. Some people are very image conscious. Other people are very cerebral, and they can't help but to go into their heads. For example, there was a CEO I was working with, and when you entered their office, all they had was a wall of books because they didn't want any personal contact. That's an example of autopilot. So the invitation is to notice when we're behaving in a repeating pattern that sometimes serves us and sometimes doesn't serve us. And the trick is to bring awareness to it. So bring awareness to where we're being automatic, whether we actually want to behave that way or not. And that's the invitation to catalyze change. I often talk about an awake asleep line. In a sleep place, we're often complaining. Whenever there's a complaint, we're typically in an asleep place because there's energy there that's waiting to be created. And then when we get to that more creative state, it's the more of the awakened place. So that's, for example, catch yourself in just a really practical example. Anytime we complain, then there's an opportunity to create something or build something, or also just to either be with it or to focus our attention otherwise. Most people don't even have a personal aim. So unless we have a personal aim, we will be led. We won't be leading. So how do we as leaders then create personal aims and intention that positively serve us and humanity?
So beautiful. There's so much here. Okay, so I'm going to go to, we talked about the personal aim, and the discussion that we're having now is not a discussion that you're putting on the agenda at the board meeting or around the monthly meetings. These are discussions that you're having with leaders who are awakened or open to this. So what I'm going to ask you is, how difficult was it for you to actually first starting having those conversations and with the leaders, and just to kind of, was there an intake form? Are you spiritual? What kind of questions were you asking, or did they already have an idea that that's where that conversation was going to go based on your work that you've done before?
Oh, what a great question. Well, as you know, The Awakened Company, the book, was re-released just this past year in 2023. It was written originally in 2015. Most business books last about 6 months. So in many ways, the challenge of leading is often you can see things before they happen. And then Monica, I would say also that you're in that boat as well, in terms of your positive force for change around women and supporters. And so that often it often takes some time for people to catch up. And what's so beautiful is now I feel there's this blooming of what I've been speaking about for years. And in many ways, then that's calling me to go even deeper with what we're talking about today. So it has not always been easy. It has been, I've, I spoke for the Dalai Lama Center in Vancouver, and I said how much I had to rely on data at the time. And because I felt like I had to kind of somehow convince people of it. And it was actually through the data that I would initially, so through the head center, that I found I was convincing people. And then once people were convinced, they kind of got full on. And a lot of the people we've worked with us have worked with us for decades. And so some people are ready for this, some people aren't. And the question is like, how do I be okay? And whatever nugget or wisdom or I can offer to serve people to wake up, I will do so. And people will or will not be ready for it. And how to also be for me to be okay with everybody not getting on board. Like there's a sense that you can't be everything to everybody. And there's got to be this kind of some rejection so that I can serve the people and organizations that I've been meant to serve.
So my next question is what do you know now that you wish you would have known?
So,
and worried less about, so the place that you're in right now is a place of really knowing and a position of power. But what are some of do you think that you would have been ready to step into that earlier?
This is a very, very good question. I have 2 kids, 2 boys, and I'm a free birder as of September. And I think I would just I organized my life very differently so that I could be around them at their basketball games and be of service to the schools they were at, etc. To be a mom. And I think honestly, we all have these inner critic voices. Like I was really bad with making homemade muffins. I would often buy them, and so I think what I would do, Monica, is I would totally, totally reduce that inner critic voice. I still have it. I still have it. And I feel like I'm dusting off patriarchy every day. So it's like, how do we all be gentler and kinder on ourselves, and especially as mothers, like, and parents, we're trying to weave so many different things, and just for me, it's how to just drop into the ground of being and just relax that inner critic voice. It's just been so hard on me as it's so hard on me. So that would be there's lots of things I'd redo. However, that's a big one. It's just to relax a little bit. No one remembers that I brought boxed muffins. They were good boxed muffins, but that I didn't make them. Like really, but the guilt and shame of kind of like navigating being a mother and an entrepreneur and a leader, and just relax. And I would have asked for more support too.
As a single mom, there was a lot of that. And I tried to do it all. I went over and above. I drove myself crazy. And yeah, so I can relate 1,000 times. But I also felt like I had to prove myself. Like I almost, in some situations, almost showed up as both the mom and the dad, like 2 roles, because I was overcompensating. But I was way too hard on myself about that too. Right. So.
Right. And then when I know for me, when I'm hard on myself, then it's like my fuse gets shorter with everything else. And that whole self-care piece can kind of drop away as I'm giving my energy away. And so there's just, just for everyone to drop that critic, and also to drop the need for perfectionism, because what is perfect anyway? And to, that's interesting. I think doing the mother and father role would be very challenging, Monica. Like, good for you. Like, good for you. That would be a lot of work. A
I
lot of
felt
work.
like if you close your eyes and you pretend like a hamster with a wheel, that's kind of how my life felt. I felt like I was a hamster on a wheel and there was no way to get off. Like that was the mental picture that I carried a lot of the time. So anyways, I am off the hamster wheel. Thank goodness. But sometimes I do think, it's just like when you're a leader, you're continually running towards your next vision or goal, and you're somewhere in between. So while it might not be a wheel anymore, it's definitely a road and there's still a path forward. So I want to ask
Just
you.
one sec, Monica, just a question, just something I want us everyone to think about. And it relates back to the signs that we were talking about earlier, is how do we pay attention to what is actually pulling us versus us pushing towards a vision of what is? So how do we allow for the universe to pull us rather than pushing? Because I think if you look at society and the earth, I think we've pushed enough. Like our earth is kind of screaming at us at this time. And I think the invitation is to pay attention to which threads the universe is pulling on for us to complete or to manifest.
So here's something that you touched on a little bit, is the way your body reacts to something. And I think that for me, that is how I know whether it's pulling or whether it's resisting. But when I feel something that's kind of like this deep pain in my stomach, what I have to go is this something that's a gift, or is this something that's kind of going, that's a warning sign? Almost like that car in the light in your car when it says, take it for service. I've got a whole great big story on that one too, that I had with Edsel Ford. But I want to share that sometimes that feeling inside of you is just kind of that opportunity, meaning that it's fear of growth, or that fear is actually a good sign because that means that there's growth ahead. So I guess it's knowing what that is for you and that feeling, and then being able to recognize whether that is a feeling of growth or a hazard light.
Yes, very much so. Aligned or not aligned. It's very true. Very, very true.
Yeah. And what is it for you?
What is it for me? Repeating synchronicities or green light, like just a heavy, heavy green light. I also pay attention to numbers. And so those are green, yellow, or red lights, depending on the numbers, depending on the number of times too. And when my body stiffens up, that's a no. Like when I actually get like my body literally gets like like a big piece of wood, or it feels leaden or rock, like that's a no-go zone, a no-fly zone. And it just is, it's so clear to me now. And I'm still learning, how to have better boundaries with the volume of work that I'm doing. So I'm paying attention to my body cues in terms of, who do I want to play with? How do I want to spend my time? Is this of service to the larger vision of Awakened Company and also to Catherine? And I also pay attention, when you're with somebody and your energy gets lit up, I pay attention to that. And then sometimes if I'm with somebody, my energy is like, oh, and like, it's like the light switch has gone off. That's, for me, it's like, no, don't invest, because the battery matters. Our batteries matter, and our energetic field matters, and to have self-care around that.
Beautiful. Okay. So I'm going to go into self-care, but I want to now go, like, who are some of the female leaders that have inspired you, and what kind of traits, or, you might have, who has inspired you? I mean, you've got to have some women that have lifted you up, or, you're like, oh my God, like, I love what she's all about, or, modeled after.
So I have many women, and I have incredible women in my life. Just want to give a big shout out to Taylor Swift for changing the GDP everywhere she goes. Like, if that's not a positive example, like, hello, and she's in her power and she seems very connected to herself. My aunt was also a very, very big influence on me because she wrote a book and she made me believe I could write a book because I had a female example of somebody who's written a book. I see almost every woman to me is an example of something I need to learn. You know, like I see, and because there's so much women have had to dust off, and I'm finding great hope in women of the younger generations because I don't find them as caught up as I am in some of the patriarchal stuff, and that is so refreshing. That is so refreshing. Yeah, so I see examples everywhere.
So we're going to dive into, and we've spent a lot of time this has been a wonderful podcast. We dove into some certain areas that we don't necessarily talk about, which is absolutely golden. But what I'd love to talk about, Catherine, is we talk about role models, and if we don't see it, we can't be it. So why is it so important to be celebrating the achievements of women?
It is so important to be celebrating the achievements of women because when we experience an example, we know it's possible for ourselves. And when we see, so for example, with what you're doing, Monica, you're lit up and then you light everybody else up. It's like the candle is passed from person to person. When we're lit up, you're lit up, you light me up, then we can pass it on to other people so that there's more equality in the world. And unless we have those examples, we won't see it. Like, as I talked about, most often I remember like the shows I would watch on TV as a little girl growing up. The man was out working 9 to 5. The woman was cooking at home. Like, I didn't have, my mother worked. My mother was a teacher. My mother's amazing. However, she took care, it was very traditional. I come from a very traditional family. So I think the more we see different models, and we can see, I was speaking to a CEO yesterday and she said, is your house pink and blue or is it another color? She said, because my home color is purple. Like, we really are a partnership. And I thought that was really cool. I hadn't ever thought of it that way. So I think we need to see these different ways of doing and being so that we can actually get more in touch with the freedom of what our souls long for, so that we can be the creative force in our lives to fulfill what we're here to fulfill. And I believe we all are here to fulfill very specific missions, and everybody's mission is sacred.
Beautiful. And what would you share with the women that realize that that's important, but are somehow uncomfortable about stepping into that spotlight? What would you say to them?
I'm uncomfortable stepping into the spotlight, so I'm going to just say I'm with you. And the invitation is, when you've done something and you've been a little uncomfortable, and that feeling afterwards, like the other day I led a big strategy session and a woman came up to me and said, you kicked ass and you're such a good example. And let me tell you, all the cells in my body, my cellular body just lit up. And I knew that all the discomfort and all the pre-work was 100% worth it because I had a positive impact for other people. And in having a positive impact for other people, then it allows me to know that my soul's purpose, why I'm here, is being fulfilled. And it won't be fulfilled if I stay in fear, if I stay paralyzed in fear. And so I really see the next few years me being more vocal, and that's uncomfortable, and I'm going to lean into that discomfort because there's something for me to learn, and women's voices need to be heard more and more and more. And women who have a track record of being serial entrepreneurs, of being authors, of being mothers, of being wives, of being friends, of being philanthropists, of being wild dakinis. And that's not going to happen unless we step into it.
Own the spotlight. I love it. Thank you, Catherine, because somebody's to look at you, they're going to be like, oh, she probably steps in the spotlight, no problem. But I think that the more that we can talk about that as well, that it's not comfortable, but when you do it, it really helps the other person beside you, behind you. It perpetuates that ripple effect to keep going. So super important. And I'm glad that you shared that. That was super vulnerable. So thank you. We talk about women being the spotlight, but one thing that I'm pretty passionate about, of course, as you know, it is our supporter and our allies. And so I know that you're surrounded by some allies. We've had lots of conversations in the green room, and so why, like, I get lit up when I think about the opportunities with having our allies part of that conversation, how we can achieve for a more equitable world. But why, number one, who are your supporters? And number two, why is it so important to have men part of that conversation?
Yeah, a great question. I've had so many supporters, and I'll begin with my husband. We are truly partners. We're partners in business. We're partners in life. We're partners with our children. We're partners in tennis tournaments. We are true partners. And without his support, and his name is Kent Brown, and he started Blue Earth Renewables, he's one of Canada's energy innovators. And he also now has a company called Idea Well, and he provides clean tech capital. And he's a partner, though, with raising our sons. And I'd also say our sons are also supporters. And it's really, really cool. And this is a really vulnerable story. We were at the dinner table over COVID, and I was just mirroring back. I'm like, oh, it's so lovely to be around healthy male energy. There were tears at the table because they haven't been reinforced enough around the positive contributions of males. So I think what you're doing with supporters is very, very, very important, Monica. So Kent would be an example. Obviously, my dad believed I could do anything. And I think having a father like that is huge. And also the number of male clients that I have huge gratitude for their vulnerability in bringing me in to work with them. And also some of my university professors, one, Dr. Julian Barling, who's one of the top researchers in the world on leadership. He is just an inspiration. And there's so many great men that have been by my side supporting me, including the majority of our clients are male. And I just, I so appreciate them choosing to work with us. So, and the impact is they provide rocket fuel. And what do I mean by that? They have my supporters have opened up doors. They have fabulous networks, fabulous ideas, and I believe everyone should have a personal board of directors, and some of them are on my personal board of directors. So it's just we're on this spinning blue planet together. And I think the time of division and the time that's got to go. So I'm very supportive of what you're doing, and I think it's really unique and innovative. So amazing.
Well, it's going to take, number one, the leaders, the male allies in the positions of power that are going to be able to lead by example. I think first and foremost, that is how it's going to happen. And any of the women that I've actually spoken to that are in the executive roles, leading companies and organizations, they're like, you know what? I got here with a team of really incredible men that were cheering me on, helping me be the best that I can possibly be for that role, for the company. And, it all comes down to, Catherine, we all want to be valued.
Yeah.
Right. So it's no surprise. I have conversations with men. But, you know, when you actually say, I value your contribution that you're making, the difference in what you get back is going to be so much different. And so I am super excited to where we're going to, you know, elevate that to the next level. And really that's going to be part of our 2024 is to really to evolve where we're
Awesome.
inviting men to the conversation in a big way.
It's so important. I think belonging, meaning, control, the more we can empower that, and belonging is huge. And I think we all belong. And it's interesting because often we don't belong to ourselves, which is what I was speaking about when I was talking about automaticity, is how do we belong to our true self? And so I just think what you're doing is phenomenal, and we need each other. And we're not gonna, by doing things like the typical way, it's not going to solve the problems. We need to do things more creatively, like you're doing.
I've always said insanity is doing the same thing over and over again and expecting different results. So let's change what that narrative looks like. Yeah. So excited about the journey ahead. And of course, love having your support and your leadership, you know, wisdom and experience, you know, and your insights a part of that as well, Catherine. So we're wrapping up here. I've just got a couple more questions and I could probably talk with you like probably another hour or two for sure. So we'll have to have another podcast and have you back on because I do want to hear more about the book. I want to talk, you know, a little bit deeper into some of these areas, but what advice would you like to give to the listeners today? If you want to leave them with something that they can, whether it's tap into their intuition or what words of advice would you give to our listeners today?
I believe everybody should have a personal aim and tap into that personal aim by using the power of the pause, stillness practice or meditation practice, because in stillness meditation, some people may call it prayer, then something else emerges. However, unless we have positive intention or a positive aim, we will be thrown about in many different ways. So invitation for everybody to create your personal aim. I believe everybody's a leader. And then to integrate your life with times of stillness and times of pause. And as you know, we've done that on some of our calls, Monica, where we've dropped into stillness and it creates a very different field to play from. And now there's many boards of directors who are beginning in stillness, beginning in pause, so that they can be more creative as they work through the problems that they're facing or challenges.
Beautiful. Embrace the pause. That is so epic. That is the first time that I've actually heard that. So I love it. You know, when you have that centered, clear space, it really does help open up your mind to be fully present for that moment that's following. So super excited. Thank you so much for sharing that. My last question is always, what is your definition of a woman of inspiration, Catherine? You are one to me. I'm just going to say you are a woman of inspiration. But as someone that I see as a woman of inspiration, what is your definition?
So in this moment, here's how I define it. If you were to ask me another day, it might be something else. A woman of inspiration is somebody who inspires the other to plug their light in by themselves to ignite their own being and doing in the world. It is to motivate the highest good in somebody else. That is a woman of inspiration, and who's not afraid to say things that are maybe a little uncomfortable to allow for more light to be shone.
Beautiful. Well said. And, you know, I think that's a really great way to end our podcast. And I just want to thank you so much for being so authentic, so real, and so inspiring. There's so many nuggets that our listeners are going to be able to take away. If they want to get in contact with you, what's the best way of contacting you?
So go to awakencompany.com and info@awakencompany.com. Great way to reach me. We're also on all socials. So You can find us on Instagram, Facebook, LinkedIn. LinkedIn is big, and Twitter. And we'd love your engagement. And we really try to provide useful information in everything we do. So sign up to our newsletter, then you'll get updates on our upcoming books. And you'll also get really useful information how to actually organize your organizations better, and also how to awaken yourself, relationships, and team.
Beautiful. Well, thank you again, Catherine. It was an absolute pleasure having the Woman of Inspiration podcast today. And I'm going to say that if you found this podcast enlightening and you're ready to go and plug in your light and go off and do something great, share it, connect with Catherine, and really step into that pause as Catherine talks about. But thank you so much for joining us today. And I look forward to the next conversation that we're going to have, Catherine. And I will see you very soon as we celebrate the achievements of women.
Thank you so much, Monica. Bye, everybody. Thanks for listening.
Thanks, Catherine.